assessment that we do, but if you don't know, is an assessment we provide for all of our students and also for you as the parent. And it really helps with the conversation. There's 5 aspects. There's dispositions, how you interact with the world, modalities, your information processing center, and environment where you study and learn best, and your interests. It helps you to take in and learn more easily, and talents, your natural abilities. So please contact your ES to get a copy of your child's power traits if you don't have one, if you would like one yourself. And then coaching for success. Focus on solutions by asking guided questions, and we're going to dig deeper into those guided questions. Take the pressure off by engaging in a conversation. When something happens, it's always best to have a conversation around it because we may not see everything that's going on. Hear the need. That's what our goal is to hear the underlying need that the learner has. Discuss success consistently to help grow that ownership, grow that agency, and that self-determined learning. Respond to the situation by considering the need that's being revealed. We don't always see the underlying need, so we just want to respond and stay in the conversation. Celebrate each stepping stone, no matter the size. There is a stepping stone. There is something that we can encourage them each part of the way. Encourage self-assessment and reflection. Then modify goals and methods in response to the student's experience. Our experiences are changing, but our experiences is where we form our beliefs, from their actions, and then results. So we want to see what those experiences are, help have a conversation around them if more information is needed, and then modify the goals and methods to those responses. And then another quote, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And that's what this is about, is recognizing that your child, the learner, they're a flower and they're meant to bloom. And so we want to create an environment where they can bloom. So guided questions, ask versus tell. It is easy to tell when we see, I've got the answer for this, but when somebody asks, we always feel like they care about us, we're involved in this process, and it makes us think a little bit deeper too. And this is what we want for our children, our learners. So here's just some samples of questions. What are you curious to knowing more about? What did you find that helped you learn or show you're learning? How did you feel about that assignment? Now you can use that for anything. How do you feel about something that just happened perhaps, or something in the future you're considering? Or how did you feel about something? What do you need from me? What do you need right now? Were you challenged? For some students, perhaps they're not challenged. For other students, it may be they're struggling with the idea of challenge. What are your thoughts about being challenged? What choices would you make right now regarding your learning goals? This is maybe for an older child, but depending, it could be for a younger child who's already been going through this process and they're understanding being a part of this process. What do you wish went differently? What did you work hard on and it went well? That's helping that growth mindset that you need to put work in. And what went better this year, month, or week? On this question, I think about sometimes you can get a student, especially an older student, what went better this week than you thought? And you get the answer, nothing. So stay in the conversation. And something that went well, and guide them. That's the idea of guided questions. Guide them towards recognizing, here's things that did go better this week than I recognize. All right, depth of commitment. I need to flip my pages here. Whoops. All right. So this is where, this is a quick overview, but allowing the learner to choose their depth of commitment. This could look different seasons in their lives, different goals that they have, even within the subjects. And you can equate these levels with the, bronze is a C, A and B, A for gold. But the levels would be, I don't really like using that word, but let's just say bronze. Bronze, get the facts, basic information, learn the facts and show that you have the basic information. Silver level, have experience with the content, do a project, become engaged with it. And then gold, you're really going for it. This is a topic you want. This is a goal you need because of something you need down the road. And you're really going to make connections. You're going to research. You're going to apply your learning. Now, here are some learning activities. And this is just a small portion, just a sampling of allowing, again, that learner to choose and giving them some ideas. They may not know that they could make puppets and show you their learning that they just had in social studies or anything. So these are just some ideas. Your EF has even more that you can share, but allow them to choose, allow them to redo, allow them, if it didn't work out, what's another one we can try, but give them some samples that they can choose from. And again, like I'm using that word choose a lot because that's a key component, is having them be a part of the process, having them choose, helping them to engage in wanting to choose. They may not at first, depending on their experiences, if they've, aren't loving to learn right now, and so they just don't want to give answers. Just keep encouraging them to make a choice, because it's easy for us to think, oh, they'll love to draw and burl, and maybe we do need to start there, but ideally it's empowering them that they can have a choice. They can be a part of this. We trust them in making a good choice. So important elements: believe in the process. This is a process, and again, we may not see roots at first, and depending on the child, their experiences, it could take longer to see those that popping out. So believe in the process. Use guided questions. Really important to use guided questions. Be mindful of the environment. If you desire your child to perhaps love music or love reading, make sure the environment has those things around them. Make sure they hear classical music, or they know there's violins out there or different instruments that are not so obvious. Just be mindful of that environment and distractions and other things. Trust your child will learn. They desire to learn. It's possible that their love for learning has been changed for them, but trust that inside of them they do want to learn, and we want to help bring that out. Be patient. Be patient. It'll be different for each student. Just be patient and trust. Again, believe in the process. And then reflect and adjust. Encourage self-assessment and reflection for the student. We want them to be able to do this themselves as part of that self-determined learning, and we want to help them in that, and eventually that they'll take over and reflect on their own, and then modify the goals and methods in response to the student's experience. So again, this was an overview. It's about depth of commitment, self-determined learner, gave you some criteria, coaching for success, and so important, those guided questions. Stay in the conversation, believe in your child, believe in your learner, the different depth of commitment, the choices they have, the learning activities. And then, I do hope that you can connect with your EF regarding your child's powers traits as a starting point for that conversation. And in closing, I would just like to add, with staff was shared a book yesterday called LearnerCentered Leadership. And there were 3 key aspects in this book that was shared that are part of today's conversation, and they're part of our schools from day one. This has been our desire to help our students to embrace this learning. So the learner is seen as being unique in meaningful ways. Each has unbounded potential. And third, our job as parents, as your EF, as other influencers in your child's life, is to unleash that desire to learn, to believe in yourself, and to be self-determined about it, to take that, to become agents of their learners. So I'd like to thank you, and I'm going to turn it back to Elisa.
Thank you so much, Trish. That was fantastic. It's some great reminders there about how we can support our learners. And as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about different things that were coming up for me. And, different students are going to be at different places in this. They're not all going to be in the same place. And so I think it's important to make sure that we're meeting them where they are in this process and help students plan where they are. So if they're able to come up with a plan on their own and independently, then that's great. But if they need support, that we're there to support them and kind of guide them in that process. And depending on their age and how many times they've done this, they will get better at it and more independent. I find it easier to start with a subject they already love or something they are very interested in when we're starting to plan for the first time if they've never done this before, because then you already have a buy-in, right? As opposed to starting with a subject that's difficult, not their favorite, there's little interest, that's going to be a little bit harder. You can do this with PE to start with if that's something your kids are interested in and want to do, or art or music, and really looking at chunking out projects and how can you show your learning, how can you show someone else what you've done. And in your initial meeting invitation, there was a packet. I'm going to share my screen. We had a couple of handouts for you. If you see my screen now, this was one of the ones that we had. And it's like a course evaluation, where the student is rating themselves. This is very much about what Trish was talking about, where students are really involved in saying, this is how well I'm doing here. This is where I still need to work and still need practice. Did they do bronze, which are these basic facts? Did they do a project and they move up the ladder in this graphic here based on what they were able to do and have been doing? They can evaluate themselves here in a 1 to 4. As students get older, middle school and high school students, this is very helpful in them really assessing where they are and how well they may have done in a project or in a course. And here is another view of this is a course proposal. So the student could propose either something for the whole semester or maybe just one project. If they're starting out, I recommend starting out with just one project. So maybe we're going to talk about the Roaring 20s for US history, and we're just going to focus on that particular aspect of the course as opposed to the entire course, so that the students can easily begin to learn how to make a proposal, assignments, what materials might they need to show their learning. I know my daughters love to do stop animation, so maybe they're going to do something with stop animation and they need an app and they might need either Legos or dolls or something or they're going to draw it out and they might need markers and paper. So this is where students would plan that to make sure that they have all the materials and all the things that they need. And then moving on to a timeline, how many weeks do we have for this? When should we have a draft ready to share with someone? When is the final project due, to help them chunk out their projects and really see where they are. And, did I meet that goal? Did I not meet it? Did I need to change or adjust something? We as adults know that is definitely something that happens a lot of the time, is we need to adjust and we need to reevaluate where we are and kind of see where the project's going to lead us. So those are all really important things to consider as you're guiding your students through depth of commitment. Terry, did you have anything that you wanted to share or came up for you during Trish's conversation with us today?
Yes, thank you very much. When Trish was talking about the guided questions, she gave some, excellent guidance as far as, when you ask a child, how'd this week go? What came up better than last week? And, it's not uncommon to get that answer of nothing. And, you can maybe guide the child through with some suggestions. Another approach would be, responding with, when the answer is nothing, putting it back on the student as far as, okay, well, so what can you or what can we do about it? And I just want to speak to the idea of ownership. People get really excited about the word ownership, whether it's about owning your own car, your own house, your own business, and people think, woo, freedom, right? I own this. And I think of the young child that tells the older sibling, you're not the boss of me. And so, from a very young age, we like the idea of owning things and being our own person. But what sometimes people forget is that there's accountability that goes with that as well. So, our desire is to support families in the child taking ownership of their learning, and also recognizing there's some accountability there. So if you're not getting anything out of it, if you really feel like you haven't learned anything in the last week, or you don't like what you're learning, what are you going to do about it? And really empowering the learner to understand they do have a say in this, and the flexibility. And if they don't come up with it on their own, there's a team of people to turn to help them with it.
Thanks, Terry. That's awesome. And we do have a parent in the chat who commented, if my child said nothing has to change, everything was great, then how can we still improve that project? How can we still make it better? So that was a great addition from her. And at this time, if you guys have any questions, we are here for you to support you and guide you in this process. So raise your hands, your digital hands, or turn your camera on if you want to, and raise your real hand so we could see you. You can also post your questions in the chat if for some reason you can't unmute. But Stephen, go ahead and unmute and let's hear your question. Yeah, you're still muted. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sorry, my audio's been scratchy since I joined.
We hear you perfectly. So if you want to ask your question, you sound great to us.
Oh, I thought you were looking for a roll call when I raised my hand.
Nope, I was asking to see if anybody had any questions, but did anything come up for you? How is this sounding for you?
Well, it's nice for the learning process that you folks subscribe to at Montessori to be reinforced for us, that learn differently, and it may take some time to really progress to that level that you folks are at and you're trying to get our children to. So that's what I like about joining these and getting things reinforced, and then I can reinforce them to my children.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's absolutely our goal, is that parents and students are able to come together and make this part of their process and what they want to do in their home. So thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else have anything that came up for them? Any questions about how to implement this with your own students? Have any of you tried any of these strategies? Maybe. I know there's another comment in the chat about progress is impossible without change. So absolutely, that is a great quote, and we can't improve unless we change something. So that's an absolutely great thing to be teaching our students and sharing with them. Stephen? Oh, he's signing off, it looks like. Okay. Yeah, any other questions or comments? Anything, even if it's just, this has been hard and you've tried it and, maybe something didn't work so well. Carrie, is this something that you tried with your kids when you guys were homeschooling? Did they have some choice, and what worked?
I think for me, and just so people know, my kids are now 23 and 25, and they're college graduates. So it's been a while since we went through the homeschooling process. For me, I think one of the things that my kids would tell you that they'll always remember is, just about anytime we did anything or went anywhere, it was, what are 3 things that you learned? And so they just got in that habit of the active learning. And then the other thing I think was just, if you're not going to decide for yourself, then somebody else is going to decide for you, and you may not like that. So the better you get at navigating your own life, the more you're going to be able to do it, instead of other people having to. And, this gets very challenging working with students that have been in a traditional setting for a long period of time, because they do come from a place of just tell me what to do. And I'm not going to blame that on the district model. I mean, obviously that does, it supports that. But I will say, even with my own two children, same parents, same household, both homeschooling, I had one that was more drawn to let me do it myself and I've got this, and another one drawn to just tell me what you want to do. So, you know, it's not all about the environment. There are things in our personalities and our dispositions that will lend themselves to that. But still, both kids were always told, even the one that said, just tell me what to do, that, okay, you want me to tell you what to do, it's going to be across the board. You don't get to pick and choose when you get your freedoms.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing to point out. I have 3 kids that I'm homeschooling, and each one has their own personality and their own dispositions that play into it. They also have their own talents. I have an artist who would rather draw anything and everything than have to do anything else. And, you know, the other thing that we want to talk about is, you know, students with learning challenges. So maybe your student has a learning challenge and they have some additional supports that they can draw from. So reminding them what those are, what are your options? Are you allowed to use a calculator, and how do you use a calculator in a way that's positive and helps you still learn? You know, do you already know your multiplications? Is the calculator there as an aid to just speed the process, not to necessarily do the work for you? And those kinds of things in the tools, when we saw that chart that I showed, you know, materials needed, they might, you know, need to use those tools, and remembering that those are available. And also for a lot of our students, it's going to be about application of their learning. So I know I have a child who started her own business. She started a pet sitting business. And so we've talked about how is the stuff you're doing to build your pet sitting business connecting with the things you're learning, and how are you showing what you've learned this year or in the past to your educational facilitator through this? Well, she's communicating via written communication, emails with her customers, and she's having to check her spelling, and she's having to make sure that she's clear. And those kinds of things can be a work sample to show her writing to her educational facilitator in a different way that's not an essay or a report or something like that. So thinking outside the box about how students show their learning is really important. So I don't know if that brings anything up for anyone, but that's definitely something I wanted to share today. There's a comment in the chat about taking your child's power traits into consideration. We sat down together and planned her schedule. Having a say in her time and how she's going to spend it has made a big difference in her level of dedication and involvement. So that's one way we've planned in our learning at home. So definitely sitting down with the students. I have, like Terry was saying, different kids, different styles. I have one kid who thrives on an hourly schedule, and she wants everything plugged into that hourly schedule for her week, and that makes her really happy. And my other daughter looked at that and said, please don't make me do that. That is so intimidating. That stresses me out. And I said, okay, how would you like your work to look, or your plan to look? And she's like, I just want a list of the different topics, and then I will check them off, and I get to choose when I want to do them. Do I want to do it in the morning, first thing when I wake up, in the middle of the day? So that for her was more helpful. And so that's definitely a way to consider, you know, how we're going to show students what they need to do and help them plan in different ways, because we know as adults we plan in different ways. We have some of us who like a digital calendar, and some of us like a printed old school paper planner. And so depending on what we like, you know, what's our preference, our students have preferences too, and really being able to connect to those is really great. We have another comment. Says my student reads in his mind or head, and he's 6 years old, and I'm trying to ask read alouds to help out with pronunciation. How to steer him to read out loud? So I think she's asking, you know, what ideas we have for her to see how we can encourage read alouds. I will say that in our house, one of the things that we've always done from the time our kids were little is listen to audiobooks. That's been something that we've done for a really long time, and that encourages then our kids to read out loud themselves. Modeling is another great one, you reading out loud, and then maybe taking turns. So maybe they're not going to read a whole chapter out loud, but maybe they're going to read a couple of sentences. Trish and Terry, do you guys have anything to share about that? Reading out loud, encouraging read alouds.
My first thing that comes to mind for me was already put in the chat by a parent, and that is, starting with interests. And I know one of the things, and not every child, likes being huddled up together, but fortunately my kids did, and we just, piled on the couch like puppies or in bed or whatever, and they just liked the cuddle time and reading and talking, and I will say a mistake that I learned from, and I don't know if this applies to this parent or not, but I feel like it's worth sharing. So as a classroom teacher that quit teaching to be home, homeschool my kids, of course I got all kinds of criticism from my teacher friends. I felt pressure, make sure your kids are reading on time. I had a friend whose daughter was born at the same time as my son, and she's reading Harry Potter in kindergarten, and that kind of, so you get caught up in all that. And man, I was going to make sure my son was reading, and I was just destroying him. I was taking away the love of learning, and I thought, okay, I'm going to take some time here. It's not going to ruin him if I don't give him formal, learning or teaching in the next month. And within 2 weeks, I was walking by his bedroom, and he was reading aloud in his room by himself. And so, this is a common mantra of Trish and the Learning Styles program is take the pressure off. And so, I know you have concerns. You want to be able to make sure that your child can, read aloud and pronunciate the words correctly. And that is important, but just, it's kind of like sneaking spinach into their fruit smoothies. Don't let them know that it's there, and just relax with it. Just really relax with it. I know that's easier said than done, but trust me, as somebody who now has 2 adult kids that were homeschooled, it will work itself out.
I like what you said there, Terry. It's just trusting and giving it time, and it's different for the different personalities. And for the read aloud, one of the things I've seen work is having them perhaps, we've seen this. Some kids automatically will teach to their dolls, their stuffed animals, but maybe having them read to their stuffed animals or what have you. And then depending on the situation, it could be, oh, wow, hopefully they share about it, but getting permission to oh, can I listen with you sometime, when they build confidence. And so I think that's really neat. And then I wanted to add, you had talked about, Terry, how, that love of learning. And I know when when we first started homeschooling, and my son just regressed 2 years, just was reading first grade books again, perhaps because his sisters were both in first grade and he was in third, and he was an avid good reader, and all he wanted to read was Dr. Seuss. And so I had a good EF, and just take the pressure off, let him detox was a word we used back then. And it took longer than 2 weeks. It took, I wanted to say, over a year before he finally started gravitating back up with books. And I just thought, he's reading at least. He's doing something. He's loving to read. Might be first grade, but he's reading. So I trusted, and he came around, and he's a phenomenal reader. So it is really trusting and encouraging them, and not comparing, like Terry mentioned. You just can't compare, and trust that process.
Yeah, I think we've echoed a lot of the stuff that's in the chat as well. Someone said read to your pets if you want to. The kids could sit around and read to a pet. I have a reluctant reader in my house, and then it was hard. It's hard to see that because that once they read and once they get into it, the whole world opens up because now they can learn anything they want. And so having that patience and taking that time to just slow things down sounds really weird maybe to you, but it really does pay off. I have this reluctant reader in my house who now cannot put books down, who is immersed in Percy Jackson at the moment and the series that follows, Heroes of Olympus, and now has all this Greek mythology in her because she's learned this through reading this book. And one of the other things that helped was her friends and her sister started reading the series, and now they were talking about the books. And so she wanted to be a part of it. And then she got started and she really fell in love with the story. Because the student does have a learning disability along with it, we made the exception. I know most people say read the book first and then watch the movie. But if reading comprehension is hard for the student or following the story is hard for them, watching the movie first in complicated plots sometimes is really helpful because they have an image in their head of what the story is. And even if the book isn't exactly the same, it's easier for them to follow along. So for older students, if movies are appropriate, it's okay to watch the movie first sometimes to help them get that plot set in, and then they can go in and read and help them with that comprehension of the literature. And then you can get in deeper and ask more deep questions. But sometimes the movie first is okay also for older students who are trying to read books that have movies. So definitely something to consider. But I love the idea of reading to your pets because my kids would totally love that. All right, it has been such a great time here chatting with you guys. If there are any other questions, raise your hand. We can take a couple more questions from you today and see if there's anything else that comes up for anybody with this depth of commitment. We're starting a new semester, at least with Dimensions. And so this is a great time to revisit your learning plan, to involve your students and your educational facilitator in this process. As you begin the semester, look at what topics are ahead. How can you construct projects, or are we just going to do the facts for this topic and we're going to expand this other one a little bit more and then really go for that big project on this other one? So definitely conversations to be having at this time as we begin the year. Someone was asking about ideas to grow the love of writing. Both my kids struggle with writing. I will tell you that one thing that has really helped my kids with writing is they have been doing collaborative writing with other students over Google Docs. And that has been, it kind of started on its own. My daughter wrote something and shared it with her friend, and then her friend's like, oh, well, if I write a paragraph, will you add another one? And so they've been taking turns adding to the story that they're making. They're 200 pages in. It is not required. It is not required assignment. It is not graded for school, but it really has helped grow the love of writing for them and peer editing. And it has given them a lot of skills that maybe they're not 100% aware of, but they are happening. And it's been really wonderful. So if you can find even one other student, because they could write emails back and forth. They have their school email they could use to write back and forth and kind of just get them started with developing sentences and communicating and writing. I don't know what grade the student is. So if you can pop in the grade of the student, we might be able to help a little bit more. But Terry, do you have any ideas? Oh, fourth grade. Good.
I was just going to piggyback on that and just just make it meaningful. Show them why is it important to have writing skills. And again, going back to my own child, struggled with writing. And now, if you ask me about video games, I will tell you, limit the time and all that. But my young son did get involved with video games. In Minecraft, I allowed him to do it with others. Well, at that time, they communicated with, I think they still do, communicate with each other through typing. And all of a sudden it dawned on him, oh, I better learn how to write a decent sentence and spell the words correctly because I've got other people reading it and they're coming back and going, what? I don't understand what you're saying. And so it clicked finally. And then the other place that made a difference for him was when he was in a learning center class and the kids were all sharing their writing. And then he had a way of, oh, that person, is this age and writing this. And even if it's just something in your family, write a list of, your birthday list, or help me with the grocery list. And I know those are not sentences, but they're ways that get his hand working with his brain and putting things down on paper and seeing a purpose for putting things down on paper, whether it's text or pen and pencil.
Yeah, and I would add, I know like my daughters, they, that learning center, that competition, that worked for them. Like, oh, they're writing this, they're doing that, I want to be involved. But my son, that did not work for him. And then it's the different, sorry, my voice here, the different personalities. I'm thinking, write the essay, get it done, you know how to do it. And why would you want to make it lengthier? Well, my son's older, he's 27 now. So this is technology is just coming in. And there was a program that you could, I don't even know how you would describe it, but you pick pictures and clips and things like that. And it took a lot of time to do this, but we thought, I'll try this. And then I would just copy and paste out of what he created. And he would have a 2-page essay. I had no idea he'd write that much, but the time he took to put clips and pictures with each portion that he wrote, I thought, why would anyone want to do that? That's the different personalities, right? It took him probably 5 times longer than if he would just write it, but it worked for him. He enjoyed creating something creative, I guess, and visual. And he's a graphic artist. That's what he does. And so that was all new back then, that idea. And that was who he was. And then there was all this writing in there. So having that conversation, what are they interested in? I want to share one more thing. I remember a young child, they loved to paint. And so at first the parent said, oh, we'll get this done and then you can paint. And then we talked for a while on my roster. And I said, how about, this is a kindergarten, first grader. I said, how about letting her do painting for all her subjects? And so when I met with them and the parents said, okay, we'll try this for a month, I couldn't recognize which painting went with what, but that student would say, oh, this is math, and here's what I learned. This is social studies. And all this learning came out from her because she was excited. She was able to express it through painting. And the parent was just tickled. And so that continued on. And she really learned the material and was excited about sharing the material and retaining that material for a long term. So, trusting that process and having that conversation.
Trish, that makes me think of one of my daughters who is an artist and will draw these elaborate characters. And then I ask her about it and she has this whole backstory she's created for them. And so now her art teacher, Mr. Matt, if you have kids in his class, kind of encouraged her the other day. He's like, oh, you really should write this down about your character you created. And so she came back, she's like, oh, I guess I should tell him I kind of already started writing that. And so, this idea of, oh, this is really for me, about me, things that I love. She started to want to write about it. And the other thing I posted in the chat, writing thank you notes is such a purposeful way to practice writing. And if you are relating and inspiring that personality that really likes to take care of other people, that might be a good way, for a student who is that way also to go ahead and show that and do some learning along with it. Oh, you forgot your capital. You could help them script it and copy it if that's where they're at the beginning. That's okay. Eventually that will grow into them being able to write their own notes. But definitely that. And we definitely do the grocery list one too, Terry. So that's a really good purposeful one, especially when they're reluctant writers. I'm like, oh, I need your help. And they're willing to help. And they're like, okay. I'm like, okay, I'm going to rattle off stuff that we need and you write it down. And, sometimes I have to go back and go, oh, what did you try to spell here? I forgot. And then we'll try to work it out. but definitely finding purpose into why we're writing is really important in the writing process. Wonderful. Journaling thoughts is and experiences is in a combination of words and drawings. Yeah, Terry, that's a good one too, to give them that opportunity. All right, everyone. Well, we have about 10 more minutes. So if you guys have questions, we are here for you. We love the conversation. And like I said, this is a great time to start talking to your EFs about your second semester learning plan. We start the new semester on the 1st. So as you meet with them in the coming week, if you're with Dimensions, that's definitely a great time to start having these conversations and start planning and kind of sharing our depth of commitment with our students and asking them. And like I said, it doesn't have to be for the whole course or for every subject. Pick one. Start with one small thing where they have choice, because that is going to grow and snowball into, then they're going to be like, well, what about this? Can I do this for this other subject? And oh, I see we're going to be learning about this. Can I add this? Can I do this other thing? Is it okay if I do, you know, a video or something like that? I'll give you guys a few more minutes in case there's any other questions. While we wait, Trish, do you have anything that you want to close out with?
Just saying thank you. And I know some of this is new for others. You're building and growing. Trust just where you are. Talk to your EF. They can support you in this process. And again, I love what you said, Elisa, about take one subject, perhaps. Take one area of interest. Try something a little bit different. And with one area, whatever you're comfortable with. But there are people that have such success when they do this. And again, taking that time when you see your child finally break through and desire to learn, love to learn, ask questions, start driving their learning, it does happen. And so your EF can help you with that. And we're here also for you. And I really thank you for taking the time to want to learn more about how you can support your learner in your home. So thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us. We do have another Lunch and Learn workshop coming up, and that's going to be on February 10th. The topic of that workshop is going to be family meetings and how they can help a conversation within your family, which could include, you know, this depth of commitment conversation, but also learning about what your students' interests are, what things are going well for them, keeping that social emotional connection and making sure they're feeling well as well is kind of some of the topics that we're going to talk about. So we invite you to stay on the lookout for that invitation and to come and join us again for Lunch and Learn on February 10th. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you here and sharing with you more about how we can help support you and your learners. If you guys have any questions after the meeting, you can reach me at ehilliard at dimensions.org. Sorry, I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. Thank you so very much for coming, and we hope that you are walking away feeling like you learned something and you have something to offer your students. Thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.